Hello, this is Dr. Anthony Festmeyer. In this series of videos, I'm going to walk you through how I approach various types of scales on the guitar. Today we're going to go ahead and start with the major scales in 7 different positions. Now these scales will be in what I consider positions, so let's go ahead and define that first. I'm going to move my first finger up here to the 5th fret. I'm going to line my fingers up 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th frets. Now this would be considered the 5th position, but there's a little bit more to the story. Here I could take my first finger and move it back to the 4th fret, and I could also bring my pinky up to the 9th fret. So my 5th position technically goes from the 4th fret to the 9th fret. Now just to qualify that a little bit more, in the 5th position, my 2nd and 3rd fingers will only play notes in the 6th and 7th frets, whereas my first finger can play notes in the 4th and 5th, and my pinky can play notes in the 8th and 9th frets. Okay, now that we have position defined, let's go ahead and start to work on the 7 positions of the major scale. Now today we're going to work with the C major scale first. And with my students, I refer to that as the scale of white keys because it's basically the white keys on the piano. Has no sharps, no flats. Basically, it's all natural notes starting on C. So we have C, D, E, F, G, A, and B. Now we're going to play those notes all over the guitar neck today with these 7 positions. So I'm going to move my first finger up here at first to the 9th fret. This will be 9th position. I'm going to line my fingers up. Now for the C major scale, I need to have C first. So I'm going to stretch my first finger back to a C note. Again, this is 9th position, but my first finger is at the 8th fret. I'm going to start with this stretch here and play C, D, and E on the low E string. Moving on to the A string, I'm going to keep the same fingering and I'm going to play F, G, and A. On the D string, I'm now going to move my first finger back up to the 9th fret and I'm going to play B, C, and D. Same fingering for the G string, E, F, and G. Now with these scales that are in position, there will always be 3 notes per string except for 1 string. Now here that's on the B string where I'm only going to play 2 notes. 2nd finger on an A at the 10th fret, pinky on a B at the 12th fret. And then finally I have the high E string. Now my high E string and low E string will always be the same with these in position scales, just 2 octaves apart. So here I have C, D, and E. All right, so here's that entire scale. That's the ascending version. It's also important to practice descending. Okay, that's position 1. Now to get position 2, I'm simply going to move my first finger to the 2nd note of the C major scale, which is a D note. And I'm going to start there with my first finger. Now this will be in position 10. My first finger will stay there at the 10th fret, but my pinky will stretch up for a couple of notes to the 14th fret. So this is what that looks like. I've got D, E, and F. No pinky stretch so far, it's at the 13th fret. But for the next string, I've got G, A, and B. And to get that B, my pinky has to stretch up to the 14th fret. It'll be the same fingering for the D string, C, D, and E. Now for the G string, there will only be 2 notes, F and G. And then we have 3 notes on the B string, A, B, and C. And then again, my high and low E strings are the same notes, D, E, and F, just 2 octaves apart. So here's that entire scale. Now, by the way, that second position, starting on D, can also be referred to as the Dorian scale. So now I'm going to move up to the third position. I can also refer to this as the Phrygian scale, or simply the third position of the C major scale. It starts on the third note, C, D, E, and I will start that with my first finger. Now this scale has no stretches, so I simply align my four fingers up right next to each other in adjacent frets, and I keep them there. So here I'm going to play E, F, G on the A string, A, third finger for B, pinky for C. Same fingering for the D string, D, E, F. And then again, only two notes on the G string, G, A. Three notes on the B string, B, C, and D, first, second, pinky. And then high and low E strings are the same, just 2 octaves apart. So I have E, F, and G. So here's that entire third position. Okay, now moving on to the fourth position, starts on the fourth note of the C major scale, and that's an F note. I bring my first finger up to that F note here at the 13th fret. But by the way, this will be in the 14th position. Now I could also move this down and play it in the second position. Get some pretty good stretches down there, but totally playable and usable. But let's go ahead and play this up here for now. So I'm in the 14th position, but my first finger stretches back. So here I get F, G, and A. Then I move my first finger back up and get a B, C, D, 14, 15, 17 for the frets. Same fingering for the D string, E, F, and G. Now on the next string, I'm only going to play two notes. I'm going to play A and B. Then I'm going to move my first finger back to the 13th fret. I'm going to play C, D, E. Again, gain that stretch between the first and second fingers. Then the high and low E strings, of course, are the same. So here I get F, G, and A. So here's the entire scale. Move the first finger up. Move the first finger back. Okay, next I have the fifth position of the scale. The fifth note of the C major scale is G. Now I can play that here. Totally usable on a lot of guitars. But I can also play it back here at the 3rd fret. These are both G notes, so as long as my first finger is on a G on the low E string, I can play the same basic position. So here I'm going to start at the 3rd fret. Now this one is actually in the 4th position. So I align my fingers up here in the 4th position, but stretch my first finger back. So I get the stretch between 1st and 2nd again. So here I go, G, A, and B, and then I have the same fingering on the next string, C, D, E. Same fingering on the next string, F, G, A. And now I finally move my first finger back to that 4th fret, and I get B, C, and D, 1st, 2nd, pinky. Now for the B string, that's the spot where there's only two notes, so I get E and F with 2nd and 3rd. And then of course my high and low E strings have the same letters, so I get G, A, and B, 2 octaves apart from here. Okay, now here's that entire scale. Okay, now moving on to the 6th position, my first finger will come up to the A note. Now this can be referred to as the 6th position of the C major scale, but can also be referred to as the Aeolian mode or even the natural minor scale. Now this scale will be in 5th position, and my pinky will stretch up for one note, which you'll see in just a second here. So I'm going to start with 1st, 3rd, pinky, A, B, C. Same finger on the A string, D, E, F. Starts the same on the G string, and I get G and A, but then I stretch my pinky up to get that B note. Now on the G string, it's only 2 notes, C and D. 3 notes on the B string, E, F, and G. And then my high and low E strings are the same. So A, B, and C. So here's that entire scale. Okay, now we've already moved through 6 notes of the C major scale, tracing them on the low E string. Now we're going to do the 7th note, which is B. I'm going to move my first finger to that B note. Now this scale can be called the 7th position of the C major scale. It can also be called the low Korean mode. And my fingers are just going to line up here. There are no stretches for my first or pinky in this particular position. So here I'm going to play B, C, D, first, second, pinky. Same fingering, E, F, and G on the A string. On the D string, I'm going to go A, B, pinky on C, so first, third, fourth. Same fingering for the G string, A, B, C. Then just 2 notes on the B string, second and pinky, a G and an A. And then the high and low E strings are the same, so B, C, and D. So that entire scale is this. Now it's important to recognize that for these scales, I'm basically tracing the notes of the C major scale with my first finger on the low E string. So I start off here with C, play the first position, then D, second position, E, third position, F, fourth, G, fifth, A, sixth, really wherever I can find that A, or the G, or even the F, and then B would be for the 7th position, then that returns me back to C. Now, when practicing these scales, it's important to work through all the different possible major scales. And you can use the circle of fifths as a really great reference for doing this. And I always recommend that students go backwards on the circle of fifths as they're practicing this. So here we just did the C major scale. If I go counterclockwise on the circle of fifths, I move into the flat keys, and the F major scale would be next. The F major scale has 1 flat, a B flat. So I could start off by tracing the notes of the F major scale on the low E string. So I have F, G, A, B flat, C, D, E, and F. So my first position will start on that F. Second position will start on the G. Third position on the A, etc. And now I could do that with all major scales, tracing the notes on the low E string and playing through each of those 7 different positions. Now, if you're not familiar with mapping all of the notes on the guitar neck, you could go ahead and check out this series of videos above. It'd be really important for being able to trace those notes on the low E string. All right, now that's how I approach major scales in position on the guitar. I hope that was really helpful, and thank you for watching.